Well, hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to my very first vlog about my small collection of Leica cameras. I first started collecting about, I don't know, 5 or 6 years ago, but I did have a Leica IIIA, which I bought back in the 70s, and I later sold it. And I will talk about that camera a bit later on. Unfortunately, I don't have it now, but that's just the way things go, isn't it? So my current small collection consists of 6 cameras, and one rather interesting copy. But when I first decided to do these vlogs, which incidentally are going to be straight out of the can, I'm not going to do any fancy editing. They are literally being recorded from the hip, as it were. So you'll have to take them with the rough and the smooth. It's just going to be casual conversation, me rabbiting on about these cameras. When I first thought about doing this, I was going to do it sort of in order of acquisition, but that wouldn't really make sense, really. So I've decided to do them chronologically. So I'm starting with the oldest in my collection, and then I'll work forward. And the oldest one I've got is this 1936 Leica IIIA. The 3A was a development from the 3. The difference being that the Leica 3, which looked exactly like this, didn't have the 1/1000th of a second shutter speed. Its maximum was 1/500th of a second. And the 3A was then followed on by the 3B and the 3C and so on. And I do have those cameras as well. So I thought it'd be quite nice to start with the oldest and then compare it with a later model, so you can see how the range developed over a period of time. This particular camera was acquired at a local auction, a local fine arts auction, not a camera auction. And the problem, of course, with auctions is that you have to pay a buyer's premium. And this particular auction house, with VAT and so on, it's about 24%, which, when you think about it logically, is quite a hike on the basic price that the camera was auctioned for. But on the other hand, you do get a good chance to have a look at the cameras beforehand and see whether they're worth buying. In actual fact, I think I've bought 3 cameras that are in my collection from that source. This one, I say it's a 1936 one, so it's an early 3A, because they were built between 1935 and 1938. This one is one of the earlier ones, and I've never had anything done to this camera. It works, takes quite a nice photograph. It does everything it's supposed to do. I'm not saying it's in perfect mechanical order, but I found that cameras like this, they will tell you when they need attention. Some of my collection have had CLAs. This one hasn't, and the reason it hasn't is because it appears to be working properly, and I've no idea of its service history. It may have had the CLA in the past, or it might not. I've no way of knowing. All I do know is that it appears to do everything it's supposed to do. When I bought it, it came with the much later Elmar f2.8 lens. That particular lens dated from 1959, and it now sits on my 1957 Leica IIIA, which I will cover later on. If there's enough interest shown in these uploads, then I'll do more. The next one I'll do will be the 3B, because that's a logic follow-on from this 3A. But it didn't come with this lens. I just happened to have this lens about my person, as it were. Well, actually it wasn't on my person at all, it was in the cupboard. But I like my Leicas to have lenses that are sort of appropriate to the body age. And this is a nickel Elmar, so-called, because it's in the nickel finish. It doesn't have any of the chrome plating, or the silver plating, whatever you like to call it. The later ones did. And really, you can't tell until you compare it with one of the chrome ones. It's, as you can see, it's quite an early one, because the F numbers are different to what we'd expect these days. We've got an F9 and so on and so forth. It's not perfect. It's 80 odd years old, so it's only right and proper. It should have a few blemishes. It's just through use. It's patina, isn't it? I mean, when you think about it, when you think about its age, it is actually remarkably good condition. There's a little bit of brassing here around the rewind knob. The collar that should be around that shutter button is missing, and if I turn it round the other way, there's some brassing there on the diopter control. But so what? Doesn't really matter. In fact, I prefer my Leicas, to have a little bit of wear on them, because if you bought one of these that was absolutely mint, you'd be frightened to use it, wouldn't you? So yeah, that's okay. This one, as you can see, has been fitted with a flash connection at some. It's been synced up for flash at some point. I don't know who did that, whether it was a factory conversion or what, but it's not a problem there, is it really? You don't really notice it. You'll see some where they put the socket right on the top, and that's a bit of a shame. I've actually seen one where it's been stuck right in the middle of the Ernst Lights Vestlar engraving, and that's a shame. So that one is in as good a place as any. Obviously these weren't synced for flash when new. The first ones to be synced at the factory from new was the Leica F, the post-war Leica F. But all in all, it's in quite nice nick. That's what the shutter sounds like at 1/200th. That's what it sounds like at 1/60th. I won't go all through them, but as I mentioned earlier, well, actually, I don't think I did mention earlier. I should say that for those who aren't familiar with these cameras, the top shutter control goes from 1/20th of a second up to 1,000th, and if you want to use this is the slow speed dial here, you set the shutter speed here to 1/20th, and then you can use the slower speeds here, which go from 1/20th, an eighth, a quarter, a half, and 1 second. And if you notice, the bulb setting isn't actually a B, it's a Z. That's because it's a German word, which for the life of me I can't remember what it is now, but if you look it up, it's the German either for I don't know, bulb or something like that. The Leica range, of course, had been openly on the market when this camera was made for quite a long time, and the Lights company were making optical instruments way back. In fact, the camera side of it when this was made was still a relatively new part of the company's output. I think the first commercially made ones came on the market about 1920 or something like that, and they were designed by a chap called Oscar Barnack, and these are referred to as Barnack Leicas. What's a bit of fluff there? Get that off. These are referred to as Barnack Leicas after the designer's name. And Oscar Barnack was he didn't suffer from brilliant health, and he was a keen photographer. I think he was employed by Lights as to develop cine cameras, I think for professional use. And while he was doing that, he came upon an idea for using a basic camera to hold a length of 35mm cine film, so he could calculate exposures. And I think the original idea was that once these exposures had taken place, the film could be removed from the camera and quickly developed to a negative stage, so that the quality of light, could be checked then, so that they could transfer those settings to the cine cameras. And it really developed from there. And it was quite a long time before these eventually went into production. I think Barnack actually had to sort of persuade Ernst Leitz II to make a camera, but and in part because Oscar Barnack didn't suffer from particularly good health, and he would have been using probably plate cameras or half plate cameras, and having to carry a box of plates with him as well. And so the idea of a small compact camera would have made things a lot easier for him. And it's just as well that he did come up with this idea, because otherwise we wouldn't have had the pleasure of playing around and owning these delightful instruments. And it's amazing just how small and compact they are. Well, I hope you can see that by the size of my thumb, which is a perfectly normal size thumb. They haven't really altered in appearance that much over a long period of time. If you take the Series 3s, and they were introduced in the early 30s, and I think it was the early 30s anyway, and if you go right up to the last of the screw thread Leica cameras, the 3G, although the 3G was bigger, and perhaps we shouldn't compare it with the 3G, because that featured some details that were taken from the M series. Let's say compare this with the 1951 introduced 3F, for example. You've got a good 15 years of production where there was only really sort of like little slight changes just to make things a little bit easier in their operation. The three, hopefully I can demonstrate that when I start showing you other cameras in the collection. The 3A, this one, was the last of the 1 cameras to have this feature here, where that's the rangefinder window, and there's the viewfinder window. And on the next model, the 3B, these were combined together in I can only sort of describe as a sort of it isn't an oval, it's like a circle that's been stretched. When I show you the 3B, you'll see what I mean. Obviously, some of you will be very familiar with these cameras, and others won't. But you'll see what I mean when I show you the 3B, assuming that somebody does actually bother to watch these uploads. Otherwise, I'm going to be doing this and talking to myself. But another feature of the 3A is that the diopter control here, this is for adjusting the rangefinder to your own eyesight settings. I'll stop using that pen as a pointer. I'll use my pinky. The problem with this, having the diopter setter here, was that when you close the camera case, or whether you put the camera in your pocket or whatever, of course, what would happen is that would immediately move down again. And so each time you use the camera, if like me you're a spectacle wearer, you'd have to keep adjusting that. And it's worth adjusting these. I find that I can read the rangefinder far better if I do adjust these. But on the 3B, which replaced this camera, the diopter setting was moved under this rewind knob, and it didn't get knocked there. So, and this is really what I mean, how each model was improved a little bit. But I'll put that back down again for now. I say this is the last of the range to have the rangefinder and viewfinder ports that distance away. It works fine. I can't say I've noticed any real difference in use by having them closer together, but moving this feature under there is a definite bonus. And what else can I say about this? Well, just look how compact that is. I'll collapse the lens back in. Incidentally, if you're new to Leicas, when you pull the lens out like so, you must always turn it to the right to lock it. Otherwise, you're going to end up with an awful lot of blurred photographs. I'll put that back on for now. I mean, look how slim that is. Like that. I mean, that can go in your pocket. That could go in any blazer pocket. Absolutely gorgeous. You'd know it's there though because of the weight. They are quite heavy. I don't know. I've never actually weighed one, but they are heavy, which it shows quality. As with all screw thread Leicas, you load the film through the bottom. It's bottom of the body. It's not a difficult thing to do. It's just a knack, and I'll remove the base plate of this one if I can. It is quite fiddly, this base plate. It doesn't go on that easily, and I can't work out why. It's got something to do with this take-up spool. If that take-up spool's in exactly the right position, it goes on quite nicely. If it isn't, it's a right fiddle, and I've never quite worked out why that should happen. It's the only one of my collection that does that. And I don't know why. I'm not going to put it back on there because all you'll see is me probably fiddling and messing about trying to get it back on. And Sod's Law says that it's bound to be really difficult, so I'm going to leave it off. But I will show you this though, because it's the instructions both in German at the top, English on just below it, and at the bottom French, and perhaps that looks like Italian. And what it's saying is that you should cut the leader about 4 inches. Now, when you get a roll of 35mm film, the leader is cut, but it's only about 2 inches. So what you have to do is get a pair of scissors and just cut yourself a little extra length. And the reason for that is that because the cameras are, well, at least I think the reason, I'm not certain, is to just make it easier for the film to locate on, initially, on the one set of sprocket holes, in other words, the one which would be, let me think, either at the top or the bottom. And this means that you can then wind the film on so that it doesn't jam. Some people claim that you can do it without cutting the leader, but I do tend to cut the leader as well. If you want to see this done, I'm not going to do it because there are plenty of people who've already uploaded how to load a Barnack Leica. But the basic principle of cutting the leader, I think, is so that you've only got one set of sprocket holes to initially align with the sprockets, and as you wind on, then if the ones on the cut part of the film have aligned, then by the very nature of things, the other set of sprocket holes are going to align with the sprocket as well. And what does fascinate me a bit is that, 35mm film, it's been around a long time, obviously in use in the professional cinema, but as far as I can tell, there's absolutely no difference in the dimensions or the spacing of the sprocket holes right from the earliest onset of the film industry. And that's standardization for you, isn't it? I've actually got some cinema trailers which I could always compare, I suppose, with a piece of old 35mm, but I'm pretty certain the sprocket holes are exactly the same. They may be perhaps a different profile in places, I don't know, but that's marvellous thing about this. It's complete and utter standardisation. And this bottom plate, it's got a few dinks and dents. I have noticed something that that tripod bush there is, I'll put this round the other way actually, is that's more or less a standard size for current ones. Some of the other ones have got a much larger, I think it's a 3/8 hole, that looks more like a quarter. And one of them has actually got a bush in, so you could reduce it from 3/8 down to a quarter. At least I think that's the rough sizes. I wouldn't have expected them to be metric sizes, but they've obviously standardised on tripod bushes at some point. Well, we'll go into that some other point. As you can see, it's open and close in English. And really, I think that's probably it. The later ones are different to this. The later ones have a protective plate, and I think these instructions here for cutting the leader end up on there on later ones. So there are these little variations that again have come about because the camera has been modified over the years. And so I think that's it now. I will say goodbye, and if you did enjoy this, please, or if you think I've made any errors or you've got anything to add, then please, by all means, make a comment at in the appropriate space, and at least then I know that someone's actually been kind enough to view it. And if these go down well enough, then I'll do one on the 3B and the 3C, the 3F, and the 3G. So that's all for now, and so thank you very much for watching. Have a nice day.